My name is Shafik Ruda, and I would like your support. Make the right choice for your family, your future, your Canada.
Before you think this is some kind of an ad campaign for the Liberals, let me remind you, you are watching Alberta Live with me, Sunita Kaul Zutshi. And the man you've been watching is Shafik Ruda. He's right here with us in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
And he is the Liberal candidate for the Edmonton East riding. Shafik, before we go on, I'd like to introduce you to Markham Hislop. He's the editor of Calgary Beacon, and he's joining us via Skype. Thank you so much, Markham, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sunita.
Okay. So let's start off, before we ask for his expert opinion on and analysis, what draws you to the world of politics, Shafik? And, you know, you're a first-time candidate. It's interesting to know what draws you.
That's a good question, Sunita. Around July or August last year, I was given an opportunity in a social engagement. Somebody was sizing me up and said, Shafik, this is my business card. Call me. We can have lunch sometime. And I just took it as a, just a passing comment kind of thing. So, but the guy followed up and he said we had lunch, and he was thinking that I would be a great candidate for Edmonton East once he found out that I live in the area. So what I told him is I would do some research, and I did 2 months of research just to find out what is politics all about when you're a candidate. And what drew me to politics at that point was some research that I did. Two things that came out completely clearly was education in Edmonton East is one of the lowest in the province. Only 1 in 4 people do have a post-secondary education in our area, compared to 50% at Edmonton Strathcona or Edmonton Centre. Secondly, for the last 10 years, my wife and I have been doing Bollywood-type variety shows, and we've been giving back to the community. So when I took those two together, and I said, you know what? I have already been involved in some type of capacity where I've been doing something giving back to the community for the last 20 years. So I said, why not take it to the national level?
But would you care to tell us who that gentleman was? Yeah. Who was your mentor?
He's one of the person working for the Liberal Party.
But from an IT consultant, that is what you are. I presume you're still at it. What is it that makes you want to give up that secure kind of job to enter the rough and tumble of politics? What is it about politics?
Maybe what I do in IT world somehow is related to what I would be doing in politics. And I'll be very clear on this. In my world, we assess businesses, what are the as-is requirements for the business, and what are the to-be world that they want to go into. So we bridge the gap between the two. You take that into politics, and you have similar situation. What are the current issues, and how can we make it better, and bridge those gaps between. So what I am doing is exactly normal, or actually it matches what I'm going to be doing after May 2nd.
Okay. Markham, if we could draw you into this conversation, you know, what we've been seeing is the trend of disenchantment with politics, whether it's from the voters' point of view or whether it's people wanting to enter politics. Do you see that changing, or do you see that Shafik as an exception to the rule, or do you think this is happening, that people are getting drawn towards politics?
Good question, Sunita. Thank goodness for Shafik that we still have people who are idealistic and drawn into the politics where they believe they can make a positive difference. That's something that, in my experience over the last 30 years, has been a bit of a decline, and I think a lot of it has to do with, if I might say, attacks from the right wing, particularly on the efficiency or the effectiveness of government. They like, the sort of the smaller, less involved government. Started with Reagan in the States in 1980. But it's struck me watching the Liberal campaigns, as well as the Bloc and the ND. Sorry, not the Bloc, the Green and the NDP in Calgary, that they're still able to attract quite a number of young candidates and quite a number of youth to their campaigns in this election.
Are you trying to say that the Conservatives are not being able to do that? Is that what I can infer, or am I off the track?
I interviewed Lee Richardson, who is the Conservative MP for Canada, Calgary Centre, the other day, and he said that one of the reasons why there's such a low voter turnout in Calgary is that people are generally content with the Conservatives, and they use those words, that they don't feel that they need to get out and vote because people are satisfied with Conservative government, and they don't need to vote because they know that Conservatives are going to be returned with a healthy majority. That having been said, we have everyone in Canada now knows that last October, Calgary elected Naheed Nenshi as the mayor. Now, Nenshi is a 39-year-old Ismaili Muslim, generally identified as a center or left of center kind of candidate. And that was really, not only did he win, but he won by a landslide. And he did much of his vote came from youth and from some of the ethnic communities. So that's been a real game changer, because those are communities that are demographics that are generally considered not to be Conservative voters, but they also don't vote in high numbers.
Let me carry on with this point, Markham. Do you think this is going to change the trend? What happened in Calgary perhaps could be the beginning of what could happen in this province, which means that the Liberals and the other candidates and the other parties may stand a better chance because of the demographic change. Can we interpret this?
I think it certainly is true in Calgary, Sunita. Calgary is one of the youngest cities in all of Canada, and that's mainly due to young professionals who come to work in the oil and gas industry. Those are voters who generally would tend to vote Liberal or NDP, maybe a lot of Green vote. And if you look at the numbers over the last few elections, you actually see that the Liberals and the Greens often take from somewhere between 25 to 30, 35% of the vote. So there is quite a significant center, left of center vote in Calgary. And I think Nenshi's election as mayor demonstrated to a lot of campaigns that there's more to be had if they can identify the vote and get it out on election day.
Turning back to you, Shafik, what happens if you do not win? Considering the background of your writing, it's been a conservative writing for a very long time. What happens if you don't win? Will you persist, or will you just call it quits?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we are about, third week into the elections, and I have heard nothing but positive reviews. I've been door knocking, and I have been putting signs up, and my team is just ever growing. I don't consider myself even thinking about May 2nd or May 3rd at this point in time. So I'm just going at it, and my focus right now is May 2nd.
But if, let's presume a scenario where you do not win, what will you do? How will that change your life? Will you go back to what you were doing?
Well, let me be clear on that. I still have a job, and I'm still an IT consultant, and that will not change, right? But like I said, this switch honestly has not been a switch. It's just another part of the world. I'm a management consultant, and I've been going from contracts to contracts. To me, this is another contract that I've taken on. So, like I said, I'm not looking forward to the end yet. Every day is going to be a battle for us. You're right. We are, like Markham said, it's an uphill battle in Alberta. But like I said, when I door knock, I'm hearing 9 out of 10 times, Shafik, you're doing a good job.
Well, yesterday you had you had some problems with your posters and stuff like that, and it's not been really smooth. Or are we misconstruing the uprooting of the posters as things not being too smooth for you?
Yes, we had some issues yesterday where our signs were removed and thrown off the street on the trees and stuff like that. But to me, my volunteers came with me right away. Once one of the person in the riding called me and said, Shafik, we saw your signs being vandalized. Volunteers came up right away and said, Shafik, do not be discouraged. In fact, we're going to work even harder to make sure those signs are replaced, and and we'll get more signs out there. The one point I want to make there is people are realizing as we have, this is a 16th or 17th day of the election call, that I am communicating my issues through whatever medium I'm getting. And I'm not getting the response the way I should be getting through debates or forums. Instead, they're communicating by vandalizing. And again, I would rather attack the issues, not attack a person.
Let's look at your writing map. The one thing that meets the eye is the fact that you have a working class constituency, and you have a very tough battle with the Conservatives and also the NDP, because NDP won the second highest votes. So how do you see your chances?
Good question. Like Markham said, in Calgary, when Mayor Nenshi won, on Sunday night prior to the civic election, he was running third. And I remember watching TV, and somebody came out and said it would be a miracle on Monday if Nahid Nenshi won on Monday. And guess what? He won by a landslide. So to me, I don't focus on where the puck has been. I'm going to focus on where puck is going to be.
So where does your hope spring from? I mean, what is it that makes you so hopeful? Because unlike Mayor Nenshi, unless we don't know about it, are you really tapping into some kind of a strategy that perhaps we don't know about, but which will make you successful at the end of the day?
Yes. I think I've broken it down to about 6 different areas where I am tapping my avenues where I can go and tap into. So number 1 is social media. I introduced you to one of my colleagues here. She's working very hard on Facebook and Twitter, and we are engaging a lot of people through that medium. And Nancy did that a lot, but Nancy was going after the whole Calgary. Mine is, like you said, it's just the one Edmonton East area. So it's a little bit challenging, but still, that is one avenue we are pursuing. Like I said, about 10 years of my past work, I've been coaching soccer, I've been coaching hockey. Just my community commitment in the riding, I have known a lot of people in the riding because I've lived there for 24 years. And when I've spoken to them, the one thing when I was doing the research before I got into this is I may have spoken to about 200 people. About 180 people said, Shafik, we will support you. And these are people living in my riding. So when you say, where do I get my motivation from? I get it right from the riding.
Okay, so how do you garner funds? I mean, do you think enough people, okay, we take your point into consideration. You say that lots of people know you through your activities. That's fantastic. But how do you garner funds to actually tap that interest in you to finally encouraging them to vote for you?
Okay. So I am 42 years old, and 42 is the age of a median population in Canada. So people have realized that I have the credibility to be legitimate candidate here. They have seen my oppositions, and they know what they have done for Edmonton East, and they will see what I'm doing already in the last 16 days, or what I've already done. So to me, when you talk about funds, I did a couple of fundraisers already, and I was able to garner enough funds to get an office space, get the signs out, and get the message across. So I have one more fundraiser coming up, and that will take me to the next level.
Let's draw in Markham at this point. Markham, do you think that lots of funds or a well-oiled machinery can in some way prevent the success of a newer candidate? Or do you think it's not so?
My experience covering the Calgary campaign, Sunita, is that many of the Liberal campaigns are actually doing quite well. I attended a fundraiser last night where Bob Ray was the featured speaker, and they packed a restaurant. It was $125 a plate. They didn't have any trouble selling it out. It looks to me like a number of the high rollers in Calgary are maybe stepping up to the plate and helping to finance the campaign. An average campaign in Calgary costs between $70,000 and $80,000, so it's no small amount. But I've asked that question of a number of the candidates, both Liberal and NDP and Green, and they've indicated that, especially the Liberals, that money is much easier to come by this election than it was in 2008 and previous elections. So I don't think the relative experience of the candidate is the determining factor here for fundraising. I think there's a bit of more excitement around the Liberal campaign in Calgary this time around, and I think Liberals are generally doing much better with their fundraising.
Do you see that? Do you see some kind of turning towards the Liberals in Edmonton as well, or is it just in Calgary that it's happening?
I door knocked about 400 houses on Saturday night, and I went, and I finally, when the last house I hit, I'd already done that house. I knew I was done for the day. I got so much response where they're saying that, and I don't want to attack any parties, but I'm just saying that when you get contempt of parliament, there's something not right in this country. And so what Markham is saying is accurate. I'm getting so much support in terms of, Shafik, whatever you need, just let us know and you can tap into it. So it'd be volunteer, it'd be just coming up and putting up signs, or it'd be just tap on the back, or I'll vote for you, or at the end I will donate.
Okay, Shafik, let me play the devil's advocate here. Okay. You, if I may take the liberty of saying so, are from an ethnic background. We don't like to put people into compartment, but that's the reality. That's how vote banks are being created in this country as well. People are kind of disillusioned. It's not the first time that they'll be voting for an ethnic person. There have been representatives from the minority community. There's more of a disenchantment with those people for not having raised the kind of issues that actually hurt or are hurting the minority communities. It's not just a disenchantment with the system. It's a disenchantment with people from the minority communities not being able to raise their voice to take on these big issues. So even though you have voices in Parliament representing the minority community, they are not taking up the issues, perhaps. Do you agree or do you disagree?
So let me understand this question. So
yeah.
You are saying that once a minority person has gone into a member of Parliament, that their issues are not being addressed.
The minority issues, which are so distinct from those of other communities. Let's face it, this country has been a country of immigrants, and each time the immigration demographics has changed, there's been representation. Voices have fought, lobbied for their kind of issues that they face. In the same way, the demographics is now changing. We have people coming from the Asian continent. We have people coming in from Latin America. We have people coming in from different parts of the world, which are not the same as what they were, let's say, 40 years back, which was the Anglo-Saxons. So the feeling among the minority, among these kind of people, is that they do not have a voice, despite the fact that there are people representing them in the Parliament, in the Legislative Assembly.
Yeah, I tend to disagree with that because, where I met this liberal person as social engagement, there were many other people, right? So the fact that he picked me or was sizing me up, it just seems like there is more and more of ethnic community, people like this person obviously was not from the ethnic minority, right? So he basically, said, Shafik, just by looking at you, just looking at the values, looking at what you present, you will be a best candidate for Edmonton East. And that is a compliment. As far as myself being here for the last 24 years, I have attended high school in my area. I've attended Concordia College, university in my area. My kids are now growing up in this area playing hockey and soccer. Honestly, I have not seen the difference between me being an East Indian or me being a Canadian. I think when I see somebody, I see them as a Canadian first. So I personally do not think that if I become a member of Parliament that my issues or my ideas will be not heard as well as some other candidates.
Now, there are two questions that just pop up in my mind when I listen to your answer. The first question is precisely because we, the minority communities are an effective tapping into the vote bank of the minority communities. Are the minority candidates being considered? That is one thing that somebody may advocate as an argument why we see more people from the minority communities, being brought forward, especially after the Calgary impact. So that is one question that comes to my mind. Do you think somewhere down the line, there is this fear of being used, because you're from a minority community, to tap into the segmented vote bank politics?
That's a good question. But see, if you break down Edmonton East, it's not East Indian. It's a very ethnic riding.
Right.
And as such, if you look at my campaign team, actually, it's mixed. It's very ethnic. I have soccer dads, soccer moms, hockey dads, hockey moms. I have people I went to high school with. I have university kids. So, and it's all demographics. And I am so blessed that I represent every one of them, and it's not just my ethnic people are helping me out, right? So I disagree again that we are being tapped into just because we are East Indian. I completely disagree with that.
Sunita, could I jump in here for a moment?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I've got a story actually with the Calgary Northeast riding that bears on your question. A few days ago, I think it was Saturday, Cam Stewart, who is the Liberal candidate for Calgary Northeast, was holding his grand opening, and I dropped by the office, and I just happened to be there at a time when they had set up a couple of tents outside the office, and there was a group of, I counted approximately 125 Sikhs who were there listening to Darshan Kang, who is a Liberal MLA in Calgary. And I didn't catch much of what Darshan was saying, but I did interview him afterwards. And it was pretty clear that what he was doing was exhorting his community to get out and work for CAM, to contribute to CAM, to CAM's campaign. So I also interviewed yesterday, I interviewed a fellow from the Sikh community who's considered a community leader, and he told me that the big issue is reunification and the changes that are coming to the immigration program under Jason Kenney, the MP from Calgary. And what it's going to do, there's going to be a greater emphasis, he told me, on bringing in educated professionals and less on emphasis on bringing over other family members. So what that means is that people who have, say, immigrated from India, and you have, maybe all of the children have come over, or most of the children, but now the government's going to make it more difficult to bring over the rest of the family. And so the reunification has become a rallying cry within the East Indian community in Calgary Northeast. And what's happening is, this fellow told me that 95% of the Punjabi community in Calgary Northeast is committed to working on the Liberals' campaign. Now, Devinder Shori is the current MP, and he won by about 55 or 60% in the last election. In fact, I think the Liberals didn't even come in second in that riding. But now, given the fact that the Punjabi community is moving over to support the Liberal candidate with money, with time, with resources, that could change the entire complexion of that race. And the betting is, and if you, I've spent in the office a couple of times of the Liberal candidate. There's a real energy there. They've got a very, very strong campaign going. And I think Devinder Shori is in for a race. And it all comes down to the issue, just exactly what you asked, was are there politics, are there programs that are of interest to a minority group or to an ethnic group that then gets them involved in a particular campaign? Does it have an effect?
Markham, this is exactly, I'm sorry for going on about this point, but what Mr. Shori might say, he might have some idea, that may not be the rallying point for the rest of the community. Is the minority candidate, or are the minority candidates looking at issues in a broader perspective? Jobs, jobs, jobs. Taxi drivers who are so well educated. This is not an issue that any of the Indian, excuse me for being so harsh, but I don't see people raising valid issues. Issues like jobs, issues like, qualifications being recognized, issues like discrimination at workplace. You might be the best, you might be internationally exposed, but when you come to this place, are your credentials recognized? Is there a certain bias that you're looked at, there's a bias towards you? Now, I have on the line with me a student, her name is Amla Isa, and she is a Somali from your riding, Mr. Shafik. I would like to bring her in, and I would like her to speak to us about what exactly are the issues that are being faced by minority communities. Just give me a moment, Maria. Yeah, can you listen to me? Can you hear me, Amal?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So what are the issues? Do you think any of the politicians so far have been able to address the issues that concern, for instance, the Somali? Let's not talk about the Indians only, because minorities would be a lot of other people as well. And Somalis, for instance, are suffering a lot. Everybody knows that. There are gangs and there are problems of drugs. How would you react to what we've been discussing?
Yes, well, I haven't heard your discussion thus far. It was just put on. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point there has been some, some issues have been addressed. However, there's still much to be done. The Somali community, like many minority immigrant communities in Edmonton and Canada, there's a lot of different issues. And so, I mean, yes, the gang violence issue is one, but it's not the only one. And sometimes we tend to just focus on that, or at least in the media, you see that's the main thing. When you think Somali community in Edmonton or Alberta, you think about gang violence. And that's just really one of a different a range of issues, just like any other immigrant community faces. So again, there has been some address to those, but there's still much work to be done.
What are some of the things that need to be done, in your opinion, as far as, we hear about gangs and we hear about drug addiction within the Somali community, and this is not an issue just with the Somali community. It could be many more minority communities. What do you think has been, are they listening out there? Are they listening to your issues?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of cooperation between different groups, between the community, between Edmonton Police, the city, and different MPs and whatnot in the city to address these issues. However, sometimes the approach is a bit problematic because, just to give an example, when it comes to the issue of deaths in the community, a lot of the time we encourage youth to speak up against and any witnesses to come forward. However, a lot of the time there's not really any safety guaranteed for them. So if they were to speak up, there's nothing really in place in terms of witness protection. So in a lot of ways, a lot of youth feel like they would be putting their lives and their families' lives at risk. And unfortunately, there hasn't been an ability to really provide safety for them. So that's just one issue. But overall, there has been a lot of progress made in the community over the past few years, and we hope that things will continue to move forward.
What is the one thing that you feel needs to be done? Because I was reading this needs assessment research for Somali community in Edmonton. This is a research paper that is, I think, just about 2 years old. And it talks about overcrowded housing among Somalis. It talks about unemployment. It talks about the fact that they're scared of going to school because mothers don't know whether their children are going to come back, whether they're going to be into drug addiction, whether they are going to be safe. Is that still an issue? Do you think this research has highlighted or has been adhered to? I mean, the recommendations have been adhered to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, there has been some progress made, again, in those areas. Unemployment here at Skerdo, where I am a youth worker, we just wrapped up the first round of our Skills Link program, where 10 Somali youth were able to actually go through 6 weeks training in various areas, and as well as be placed in as job placement afterwards, which they're doing right now. So there has been progress made in the area of employment. Again, I think that's a major area where there needs to be a lot of focus and attention paid to, and really also providing spaces for youth to come together, feel safe, and feel comfortable. Because a lot of the time, what it comes back down to is identity issues and feeling like an outsider or out of place in our society or in our school. So youth revert to groups where they feel like they would belong, such as gangs, etc. And so we're really looking to try to create those spaces in which they feel comfortable and safe. And yes, so I would say those are the two main issues right now: employment and creating spaces and opportunities for the youth to feel like they're a part of Canadian society and that they're accepted for who they are.
Amal Issa, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.
Sunita, if I could jump in here.
Yes.
I wanted to point out that you were talking about jobs. One of the things that the Conservatives have added to their platform policy is interest. I'm not sure if it's interest-free, but anyway, loans to foreign professionals who may not meet Canadian standards and need upgrading on their credentials in order to be accredited in this country. And so very often they can't pay the tuition. The tuition's fairly high. And so the Conservatives are proposing a loan program to help those people. So that's clearly targeted at the immigrant community, and clear that the Conservatives have identified that there are votes to be had in that community.
Markham, my problem with taking it as it is the fact that there's a lot of difference between what is written on paper and the implementation of those policies. For instance, yes, a lot of emphasis on people starting their own business. Who's getting these loans? who's getting even the grants. And I have spoken to people, and I do a lot of work on the minority issues and immigration. I realize that the policy might be there, the intention might be there, but most of the time it ends up as you're not eligible for that loan or you're not eligible for that grant. So, of course, that's a whole issue, and we will be talking about it separately another day. But going back to Shafik, do you think that there has been some kind of an improvement, or do you think that things are still the same?
Okay, so going back to the crime question that you had, actually the crime is down, according to the stats that I have. So the fact that the Conservative government is proposing a $13 billion U.S. mega-style prison is unnecessary at this point in time. Like that lady said on the phone, same thing, that you are focusing on an issue that it's not an issue. It's just that the media gets the attention of shootings and drugs and all that. But overall, the crime is down, and so the priority of the Conservative government. The other thing Markham mentioned as well is that giving funding to student loans. I have not heard that. I have not seen that platform. And a few platforms that I've seen from the Conservative Party, it says, once the budget is balanced, we will now give you the money. And they're proposing that the balanced budget will happen in 2015. So the majority of the things that they are proposing will happen after the balanced budget. I'll tell you two things. You tell me, when was the last time a Conservative government balanced a budget? Do you know the answer?
Yes, I do.
When was this?
The legacy was from the Liberals. I'm not going to name any individual.
Fair enough.
The legacy, you know who it was. In fact, besides all the nationalism and euphoria around a united country, the one legacy was a huge deficit by the Liberals. Let's not forget that.
No,
and it was left up to a Conservative. Of course, it was difficult for him to do that because the interest on that was so much that the basic amount was difficult to pay back.
Okay, I asked one question.
And then,
when was the last time a Conservative government balanced a budget? 1914. When was the last time a Liberal Party balanced a budget? Paul Martin in 2005.
That's because of the high oil prices. If you have commodity prices as high as $150, $160 a barrel, if you balance the budget because commodity prices are high, I don't think that's a great achievement. I mean, anyway, it doesn't matter what I think, but this is...
No, I'm just going back to the Markham's point that the Conservative are promising some things. All I'm saying is they're promising what they're promising after the budget is balanced. But if you go back in history, they haven't balanced a budget since the first Prime Minister in Canada. All I'm saying is the Liberal Party is giving, for education purposes, and this is my platform, educate, engage, and empowerment. For education, they are giving... As soon as they become the government on May 3rd or May 2nd, whenever that happens, they're giving $1,000 for the next 4 years to a student going to grade 10 up to first year of university. The free $1,000 account money into the RSP account.
The
second thing, before I finish, sorry. Second thing is they are going back and forgiving $1,500 worth of student loan if the student is willing to do 150 hours of volunteer work. So those are the two avenues where the student is now able to take advantage of student loan as well as RESP money to better himself in the education.
Some would argue that this is precisely the kind of spending that got us into that huge deficit that was bequeathed to us by the Liberals some years back. It took us up to Paul Martin to just sort out. It's precisely this kind of spending. That gets us more and more entangled into debts.
See, I disagree with you there, and I'll tell you one thing. Like when Paul Martin left in 2005, he left a $56 billion surplus. Or around there. I'm not sure about the numbers yet, but he left a surplus for the Conservative government.
The Conservatives were not lucky because prices of commodities plummeted after they inherited that huge deficit. I'm not going to name the prime ministers. Everybody knows who they were.
Are you talking about the recent change, or talking about...
I was talking about the Liberals who bequeathed a huge deficit because they were spending...
What year was that?
They were spending... it was... before Mr. Chrétien, before it was... I mean, I don't want to...
Mr. Mulroney, then?
Well, I don't want to name them because let's not name them.
No.
But yes, it was, it was because he was spending too much, and also simultaneously the commodity prices went down, that the huge deficit, which was sorted out in the time of Mr. Paul Martin, that's why we accumulate. Yeah, that's why.
All I'm saying is this oil prices and market goes cyclical, right? Every 10 years it goes up, goes down, right? We're talking about last time they balanced the budgets was 1914. So you've had over 90 years to come up with at least 1 year of balanced budget. And they have not done that successfully yet. And the oil is at maximum right now at $100 a barrel. So
yeah, but we went through a depression. We went through a glal depression. If we don't call it technically a depression, it was the downturn.
And I'll tell you one more thing on that. The Conservative government did not even acknowledge that Canada was in recession until the opposition party told them we are in recession, and that's when he came out with a stimulus package. Even prior to that, where he disagreed on that, and he prorogued the parliament. So I'm not sure if you have the facts properly.
I'm not going to be an advocate of the Conservatives, but let's face it, if they have the courage to say at a time when they're running for elections that they're not going to spend till the budget is balanced, they need to be given credit for doing that.
Fair enough, but where are the priorities on the budget right now? They have $30 billion set out for the jets. They have $13 billion set out for the mega-style U.S. prison. And they have $6 billion set out for the corporate tax cut. That's $49 billion they think that they have. You think we need all those compared to a $1 billion that we are putting on education right now, where the money should be going?
I'll ask you a question, Shafik.
I'm sure you will.
The Middle East is burning. Do you expect anything can happen? Do you or do you not? Anything can happen. As Canadians, can be asked to go in and chip in our bit. These are hypothetical situations, but you have to be prepared for the worst scenario in the Middle East. So if the Conservatives, again, please don't take it as being soft on the Conservatives. It's just a point of view because they are not here to argue their point. I'm just trying to be giving their point of view, so to say, if that's taken as that. But what I'm saying is that if that is the case, we have to be prepared for anything, given the global situation. Some would argue, perhaps the Conservatives would, that spending is just an anticipation of the future scenario.
Yeah.
Would you, as a government, not do that? Not invest in fighter planes?
Okay, that's a very good question, and sometimes you want to rethink what has happened. We have originally they came out and said it was going to cost $18 billion.
Right.
Now the cost has gone to $30 billion within 6 months or a year of this contract. This contract was untendered contract. Right? There's other places, other companies that can build airplanes and fighter jets. So the fact that this was given to one company and not even other companies were not even considered, which is a violation in itself. I think there should have been an open bid. As far as you're concerned about the Middle East, everyone has a concern of human dignity and human safety, right? So yes, Canada as a peacekeeping nation, this is our priority. We should be doing that. But the fact that we lost a UN seat in the Council for the first time in how many years under the Conservative government speaks volume that Canada is losing its appeal in the rest of the world. And why is that?
Let's ask Markham, why is that? Markham?
Sunita, so the question is, why is Canada losing its appeal in the...
That's what Shafik's point of view is. And the point of view is that the Conservatives or the government should not be spending on fighter planes, at least the fighter planes that they are planning to go in for.
Well, I think in this particular case, the need or lack... the question is, can the CF-18s that they currently have in the Canadian Air Force, the Canadian military, can it handle the job of protecting the Canadian North? I mean, there's going to be a dispute over the resources that are up in the Canadian Arctic, and what we have is 30, 40-year-old planes, and are they up to the task of defending Canadian sovereignty if it comes to that? I'm not suggesting we're going to be in a war, but just that we have the capacity to patrol those areas, for instance. And the government has decided that the CF-18s are too old. They don't have enough capability. They need to be replaced. But there are so many questions surrounding the contract that the government has negotiated. As Shafik mentioned, there's, it was untendered. There's a question of maintenance. There's all sorts of escalating costs. claims and counterclaims. Bob, I mentioned earlier that I had talked to Bob Ray yesterday. He said that the Harper government is frankly lying, and those are his words. Politicians seldom use the word liar or lies to describe their opponents. But in the course of my interview, Bob Ray called Stephen Harper a liar on that and other issues I don't know how many times. It was a very hard-hitting interview, and I think maybe a bit of a turning point in the campaign. So my point being that whether we need these or not, whether we can afford them or not, we certainly need a lot more information, because what we're being told by the government is in dispute.
Okay.
And one last thing I want to add to it, rather than having planes, let's be diplomatic about it. Let's educate ourselves and say, hey, can we solve this Middle East crisis diplomatically? And we have done that in the past. And I think that's one avenue that still needs to be worked on by Canadians and the rest of the country around the world, that, diplomats can solve a lot of problems without having planes.
Okay, let's listen to the Liberal Party policy platform. I would like you to comment on it. They've promised a lot of things. Evan, if we could play that, please. Mr. Ignatieff has been talking about the policies of his government, and let's take a listen.
Some of the teams here this morning, and I'm proud to work with him. And we're going to show you now, we're going to take you through these policies one by one, and the discussion is going to be led by a member of our team. And the first person who's going to lead this discussion is a wonderful person from one of the great provinces of Canada.
So he's talking about this added funding for education and training, and, how do you think the money is going to be, where do you think the money is going to come from?
Okay, so where the Conservative tell us that there's going to be balanced budget into 2015, with the current spending they're going with, there's a $11 billion hole in that budget. Okay, so like Markham said, there's something that we don't know that's happening there. I just spoke about $49 billion that the Conservative Party is going to spend on those three different avenues. So when you ask me where the money, there is money. We are putting $1 billion, as to Mr. Ignatieff's comment, on education. Let's educate our kids. We are giving some money, I don't know the exact numbers, to early childhood. And Mr. Markham talked about this before, our family unification program. This is a great way to get our grandparents, our parents from other countries, various parts of the countries, to come to Canada and help people like myself who are in sandwich generation, where I have little kids and I have aging parents, or people who have aging parents, where the grandparents or the parents can come and take care of my kids while my wife and I can go out and work and be contributing to the society. The kids who are at home, 0 to 5, that's the early childhood. Let's invest in that. And you don't need that much money for that, because you are getting your grandparents or your parents to come and take care of your kids. You're going to get the culture for the kid. You're going to integrate him into Canadian society. You are integrating the whole family unification.
My point or my issue with these kind of policies is that policies remain policies. Implementation is the one that is difficult, because the people who actually need them, like we were talking about the Somali community and how they're facing problems with public education and how their children are suffering. They have to work 16 hours. These kind of people, they never get to see this money that's so, so publicly announced. So it's not the policies as such, it's the implementation of the policies which perhaps is lacking somewhere. So as if you're represented, how would you see that this money actually infiltrates down to not the people who already can afford all this, but to those people who are mentioned in these kind of reports, the UN report which talks about minorities, etc.?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Again, being new to this world, all I know is the Liberal Party is committed to being very transparent. And as such, the policies that we have right now are very clearly underlined. You get the grades, you get to go. Basically, you have the money coming into your bank account, $1,000 a year. How clear can it be when RESP's accounts are opened? here's $1,000 when you get to grade 10. Right? So it's very clearly stated that you will get the money. As far as the other programs you're probably talking about, again, I am not sure how that penetrates through to the actual person looking for that money, but I'm sure there is some gatekeepers out there that do take care of that. And so the one thing I'll go back to is you have to be transparent, and this government is ready to do that.
Markham, do you want to chip in for this, the implementation of policy issue?
Well, I'm somewhat familiar with it. I mean, it's a long-standing issue that it doesn't matter which government, governments of all stripes set out broad policies. That's what cabinets do. That's what cabinet ministers do. They design policy, then they get implemented by the bureaucrats within the various departments. Not very many of Canada's programs work very well. I know there's a lot of cynicism out there about government programs and government's efficiency within the economy, but from my experience and my observation, I'd have to say that by and large, Canadian government at both the provincial and federal levels work fairly well. Doesn't mean that there aren't some programs where the money gets diverted or spent poorly or the program is poorly designed. But as a rule, I'd have to say that we're as good as most governments around the world, I mean, in the developed world. But I want to address the issue of education and training. One of the things that Canada has got to do is invest in its education system and its technical training system. We have, it's not only do we need engineers and other highly educated professionals, we also have a real shortage in the skilled trades. If you go out and, for instance, now an auto mechanic used to be, my father was an auto mechanic, and back in the 50s when he was accredited, he went through a 2-year apprenticeship and actually took it by correspondence course. Well, nowadays, you almost have to be a computer technician, and you have to be a very highly trained technician to be an auto mechanic. Well, that holds true over many, many trades, and we have a shortage. We have a very severe shortage within the trades. So, and one of the reasons why is our apprenticeship programs need some investment, our training institutions need investment, and so I think that all of the parties are committing some money and promises in one form or fashion to education and training. But I think from my personal point of view as an observer and as a citizen, I think that's a very good use of our money. If we're going to compete internationally, particularly in the high-tech industries, we need plenty, and I mean far, far more than we have now, of people who have those kinds of skills and education.
Thank you so much, Markham. And the last word goes to you, Shafik.
I agree with him 100% on that issue, that we need money on our education, on our infrastructure. We have the schools. We are closing down the schools. We have the professors. We have the teachers. This is where the money has to be poured into, as much as possible so we can get the base for the Canadians.
Without addressing the inefficiencies, you just keep pumping in money. Is that it?
No. Very clearly we are stating that education is our number one priority, especially in Edmonton East, where only 1 in 4 graduate successfully from post-secondary education.
Shafik Ruda, Liberal candidate for the Edmonton East riding, thank you so much for spending so much of your time with us here. Wish you all the best. And Markham Hislop, thank you so much for joining us from Calgary.
Thank you, Sunita, for having me. Enjoyed it.
And thank you very much, Sunita, for having me as well.
My pleasure. And that's it for this edition of Alberta Live.